Remember, Savarkar wrote The Essentials of Hindutva in 1923, 20 to 23, he wrote. At that time, even the most liberal humanitarians of the West, the greatest humanist philosophers of the West, they believed in the racial categories of human beings. That was at best beneficial racialism, benign racialism. So they thought that certain races were kind of endowed with greater capacities, higher civilization, higher intellectual abilities, and they should make the other races come up. So they believed races as categories. Savarkar interestingly says that this is all nonsense. He says that these race categories that we are creating are artificial divisions. In fact, there has always been mingling of the races, and from pole to pole, if there is one thing that is reality, it is this, that human beings are one. Whenever India was undergoing a crisis, this vision of the goddesses with the weapon arises. So when Madurai was attacked by the Delhi Sultans, and they created something called Madurai Sultanate, they forbade the temple worship throughout Tamil Nadu, and they closed the famous Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple for a good 40 years. No puja, nothing. It was completely closed. And the cows were getting killed in the sanctum sanctorum of the temples, and the rivers were overflowing with the blood of the killed cows. So they had created a havoc. At that time, from Vijayanagara, Kampanna Nayaka was sent to fight for protecting Dharma, but he came up to Kanchi, and in Kanchi he secured a brilliant victory. He thought, okay, this is enough, and I would settle for a very good rest, and he was complacent. And when he was having a good time, a sage appears along with the woman, and the woman brings a sword and tells that this was the sword of the Pandyas and the Cholas, given to them by Shiva himself, and I am giving it to you. Now you take it and you liberate Mathura.
First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Ram Sharma, Dean Indic Studies, to share his views on the spectacular book written by Aravindan ji. Thank you.
Namaste. My humble pranam to all dignitaries on this stage, especially Aravindan Neelakandan ji. Namaskar everyone who have taken time out and attending this session. This is really important event for us and very special, because I can say that Aravindan ji has been constant source of inspiration and guidance for us at Center for Indic Studies. In fact, I can call that he is one of the unofficial mentors of Center for Indic Studies. And I'll come to that part because on and off, on personal level, I have been disturbing him on daily basis to please let us know, the references, which opinions, because looking at the distortions and confusions that exist in our society right now, we need someone wise, we need someone very erudite, we need someone who has done research for decades to guide us also at Center for Indic Studies. So first of all, thank you Aravindan ji for doing this for so many years. Now coming to today's topic, suppose if I ask you this, the topic is, as you can see, this is book launch and the book titled is Hindutva. अगर मैं आपसे ये पूछूं कि हिंदुत्व वर्ड सुन के पॉजिटिव कॉनोटेशन माइंड में आता है, तो आप में से कितने लोग हाथ खड़ा करेंगे अपना? How many of you think with Hindutva you think positive connotation is coming in mind? Okay. That's surprisingly good number. And how many of you think the negative connotation comes in mind? Okay, so I think that with that, future of India is in safe hands. Okay, surprisingly. Because what has happened is, let me tell you, when I was your age, I thought 20 years back, to understand India, to understand Indian history, culture and tradition is quite an easy thing. We'll read few books, we'll understand what has, who are our ancestors, what they did, how we fought enemies and all those things. That I thought 20 years back, I'm saying. But the last 20 years of journey, we have seen that rather than finding good information or good book or good reference material to understand our culture, history, past, whatever it is, which boils down to an identity of being an Indian, has become so difficult these days because of lot of propaganda unleashed against our own identity. And that's why we have to do real struggle to navigate through all these distortions, misinterpretations, propaganda material that is available out there. My own studies tell that if you read 10 books, out of those, only two books will be of any use, 8 books you will find filled with complete lies, distortions and misinterpretations. So the big challenge for any Indian student these days, in fact, students come to us regularly, whether through social media channel or through mail. So please tell us which is good book to read or which are good books to read on Indian history, which are good books to read on Indian philosophy or Indian culture. So we must all of us ask this question, that why it has become difficult in India today to understand about our own culture, tradition, history, philosophy in our own country. We are not living in America and struggling to understand India there. This is happening in India. And that reminds me of one book which recently came out, not in context of India, but in context of America. It is written by, one writer, well-known writer there, Ben Shapiro, How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. So, 3 easy ways to destroy. Of course, he is talking about America, but in general, he is talking about any civilization to be dismantled and destroyed. And 3 easy steps are hijack the philosophy of country, hijack or distort the culture of country, cultural studies I'm saying. And the third part is history. So history, culture, philosophy. These 3 are ways to understand any civilization. And if anyone can manipulate, distort, and can provide, a lot of misinformation in this regard, then it will be very difficult for that country, particularly to understand its own identity. And here is the importance of Aravindan's work, Aravindan's, this, I think, very special book, Hindutva, in this regard. Because the same thing has been happening in India, that if we really want to understand our own identity as Hindu or Indian, or we would like to understand in general Hinduism, it's so difficult to navigate through these distortions. And Aravindan, with his wide range of command over so many subjects, with his rigorous research over many decades now, I think I have been personally following his articles, for which he is very popular, and I think for last 10 years I have been keenly watching whatever he writes. On the positive note also, what does it take to understand civilization? This question we must also ask while we are trying to understand India. Because civilizational studies come into the domain of complexity. It's not as simple as we are understanding any mathematical formula or any laws in science. Because there you have like one cause, effect, and at least with few struggles, you can understand what does it mean. But how do we begin studies of civilization? So Aravindan's work comes into the category of civilizational study. Of course, he is writing about India. Of course, he is writing about Hinduism and Hindutva. But far more, what you get a glimpse when you follow his writings is that how to begin understand civilization. Because the rise or fall or up and downs of civilization that we see, that requires first of all a very, what I call a Virat Drishti. In fact, to understand India, you need to understand how our civilization originated 5,000 years, 8,000, 10,000 years back, and all ups and downs that we have seen collectively as an Indian. Only then we can understand what does it mean by civilizational studies. So I will just share one paragraph that I wrote while I was reviewing, and I was fortunate enough to review his book. I wrote that any exploration or attempt to understand Hinduism requires a Virat Drishti, a grand, deep, and encompassing vision of how cultures and civilizations take birth, unfold, and expand over millennia. A narrow or sectarian perspective would invariably limit, if not distort, the journey of the cultural and spiritual process that culminates in the formation of a grand civilization that Hindus have built and sustained since time immemorial. And that Virat Drishti is missing in scholars that we see around, because they pick one or two subjects and start commenting on the complex issues of civilization. So Aravindan Neelakandan's Hindutva is the result of such a Virat Drishti, a grand, erudite, and magnificent tour of how Hindus explored, evolved, and integrated various organic layers of Hindu Rashtra. This historical and civilizational process of over 10,000 years has laid the strong foundation of Hinduness, popularly known as Hindutva. It is a historical as well as ongoing process that has organically integrated various races, languages, cultures, customs, and traditions. And that's why this book is important. That's why, besides this book, Aravindan Neelakandan's work is important. When I read the book, the three questions I always wanted to ask, I found answer in that. And I'm repeating those questions for the sake of audience sitting here, and I'll request Aravindanji to please focus on this. The question for any civilizations are, in my understanding, three questions we must ask. What are the non-negotiable or unchanging principle of any civilization? And in our context, Indian civilization, which we cannot negotiate whatever may come, okay, because these are our fundamental ethos, drishti, values. Second is, what are the changing and fluid dynamics of Hindu society? Because our society did not remain stuck in formulas or sayings or patterns that were discussed 5,000 years back. We have evolved. And what and how we evolved, that is an important question to ask, along with what are non-negotiable principles of Hinduism. Then third, what are the ideological boundaries that Hindutva, collectively as an Indian, resists and counters to protect its fundamental principles? If we can understand these three things, I think it will give us a lot of glimpse to understand even how to undertake studies of Hinduism or India, or for any civilizational studies. So with these words, I would like to thank again Aravindanji for taking out time and coming here and giving us this opportunity to interact with him. Thank you, Aravindanji.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ram. I guess you created a beautiful picture which would help us view what is going to happen next. So, first of all, before we go ahead, the very first part, very important part, that is the book launch. So, let us move towards it. May I please request the dignitaries to launch the book, and volunteers, can we have the books, please? So now we know what this book is about, or the subject for today's event. Yes, we know about him because he is a magnificent figure in the field of Indic studies. But at the same time, before inviting him for the talk, let us know a few things about him. Aravindan Neelakandan is a co-author of the hugely successful and bestseller book Breaking India. His book explores the historical development of fabricated fault lines threatening the unity of India. Other books authored by him in Tamil explore culture, history, science, and technology. As the contributing editor of Swarajya, he focuses on culture, science, philosophy of science, and history. His understanding of the historical origins of both the Dravidian movement and Dalit identity, plus the current players involved in shaping these separatist identities, is unmatched. His book, Breaking India, is truly a gem, and his current book, Hindutva. I guess without taking much time, I should be inviting him so that we can learn a lot more about what this book is about. Thank you. So, can we please have you? Thank you.
This book, Hindutva, naturally makes you ask the question, what is Hindutva? And I come from Kanyakumari. And as you all know, Kanyakumari is the Indian mainland's southernmost end. In a way, this book, though it may look very theoretical and it may look like encyclopedic and all that, it comes from my personal experiences. So as I said, I was born and I grew up in Kanyakumari district. And Kanyakumari is India's mainland's southernmost end. And it has a sizable amount of Christian population. We grew up, myself, I grew up in a Catholic place dominated by Catholic population. We didn't even know actually the difference between Christianity and Hinduism. I remember we used to put nativity scene in our house, as they used to put nativity scenes in houses around us, as you know, the birth of Christ. And we used to hang stars, and we used to wait for Santa Claus to come. And usually we would be thinking that Santa Clauses would come and give gifts, but actually they would come and collect donations. And we never felt any difference, like it was a kind of a fluid identity. The only difference was that the Christians won't worship in our houses, they won't accept the prasad that we give for the deities. But we would be going to these churches, we would be participating in their festivals and all that. But unknown to us, something else was building up in the district. There have been kind of movements to change the name of the district. It was called Kanyakumari, and it was one of the important Shakti Peeths of India. And there were attempts to change it to Kanni Mary district, meaning Virgin Mary district. And whenever you are going to the school, and all the schools were basically at that time, all the important schools and the economically cheaper schools were all run by Christians, Christian missionaries. I remember vividly a particular incident. There was a school day and there was a drama. The drama was about Saint Savior. And we didn't know the religious differences or anything, whatever. We were just children at that time. We were sitting and we were watching. And in that drama, there was the goddess statue. And the goddess statue would talk. Saint Savior and the gullible villagers would be bringing all their wealth and they would be giving to the goddess. Saint Savior would come and he would drag actually the priest's wife sitting behind the goddess, cheating the people. This was the drama, school drama, given to the children. This was in 1970s. It actually hurt me so much, and my friends, who were otherwise very, very good human beings even today, very good friends and very good children at that time, and they said, yeah, this is true. You people are worshipping stones and you people are worshipping ghosts and Saturn, and you are deluded by Saturn. And we, through our services, through our activities, we are actually reforming you, civilizing you, making you better human beings, making you believe the true God. So that narrative I came across when I was a child. Okay. Then came in 1982 a big communal riot in the district. A particular goddess temple from where the women would be coming, just like Sabarimala, it was called the Sabarimala of women. Because the women would be coming there, only women would be coming there with exactly the similar attire like for the Kerala Ayyappa temple. Then they would take a ceremonial bath in the sea, and then they would collect the sea water for Abhisheka for the goddess. And when they were trying to go there, suddenly this time they were attacked by the converted Christian fishermen communities. And who were these fishermen communities who had got converted to Christianity? It had a long story, in which the Hindu kings played a very important role in that they wanted Portuguese help for fighting against certain other Hindu kings when they invaded. The Nayaka kings, when they invaded, they got the Portuguese help. So in order to reciprocate for the Portuguese help, what they did was they allowed the Catholic missionaries to convert the coastal communities. When the coastal communities actually resisted the conversion and went to the Travancore king and asked him why this was happening, don't do this, we would actually penalize those who get converted by the missionary propaganda. Then the king said that I would penalize those people who are resisting the conversions. That was the Hindu king telling his own coastal community people. Okay. So now the descendants of these coastal community people who had got converted, they were now molesting the Hindu women who were coming for the worship of the goddess in their own land, and it created a very huge communal riot in the district. The Hindu consolidation happened. Before that, wherever you go, you would be actually looked down upon just because your name is a Hindu name. Just because you are wearing the Hindu sacred marks on your forehead, you would be looked down upon. And you would lose business opportunities, you would lose a seat in the school, etc., because of this. Hindus were living a kind of like dhimmis in Kanyakumari district, and these were all things that were happening right under the government, independent government, and nobody actually bothered much about all these things. Then the Hindu consolidation started happening. Once the Hindu consolidation started happening by 80s and 90s, Hindus became respected again. Communal harmony actually returned back to the district. So this was a very important lesson for me that I experienced actually. That when there is a Hindu consolidation, there is no domination over other communities. Actually, the mutual respect and real fraternal love returned back, harmony returned back to the district. So what is this Hindu consolidation? I was wondering at that time, and at that time I was a teenager, I had become an atheist. I was reading Darwin, and one summer I was having jaundice. Because I was having jaundice, whenever I was sick, at that time you don't have TV or cell phone, anything, fortunately. So my parents used to supply me with a lot of books to keep me in the bed. So I read Darwin's Origin of Species, and when I was cured of jaundice, I was also cured of the concept of a creator God. So I was an atheist, and I used to think that at that time people used to talk about RSS, Hindu Movement and all that. Okay, Christians have their church, a very strong structure. The same way Hindus have their RSS. That was my understanding. This is one fundamentalist group, this is another fundamentalist group. Both were fighting against each other, so everything is held in check and balance, so everybody is living happily. That was my understanding. At that time, the third Satsanga Chalak of RSS visited our town. It was of February 1985, 84. And his name was Balasaheb Devras. He came to deliver a lecture. My father told, come, let us go. I was first hesitant, but then just out of curiosity, I went. And he started the lecture by telling that this is the age of science when the very existence of God is questioned. That is how he started the lecture. I was amazed, and that these people are not fundamentalists. These people are not a group that is just batting for another religion against another particular religion. These people are different. So that was my first understanding of how the Sang's philosophy is different and in which it is rooted. So I started attending the Shagas and I started understanding the Sang philosophy. I understood one particular thing very clearly, that this is not a sectarian religion. It is not a religion that has a particular book, a particular dogma. And so whatever that is working for the sake of this aspect, whatever it is, at that time I couldn't define it clearly, That should be something very different. Then I started observing what actually the Sangh does and what actually gets reported in the press, how it is projected in the academic studies. And I found a very, very interesting phenomenon, that what they are doing at the ground level and what is getting reported in the press, it was entirely different, or it was partial and distorted. Why this was happening? I couldn't answer that question, but I know that this was happening. So I wanted to present what actually this Sangh is, what is his philosophy, what it is doing, and how it is different from a religious dogmatic group. That was my first thinking about this. And I started putting all my thoughts together in the form of a small writing. And that was when I was in my 10th standard, and they have given the study holidays, and I was supposed to study, and I was writing this. And my father confiscated the whole thing. He told that all you can do later, now you sit and you study. And in 2020, my father passed away, and I was going through his work, and I discovered to my great astonishment that he had preserved those papers. I have this paper still that I started writing that. So in a way, this project is kind of almost 30 years old. And what exactly is this Hindu Dharma? Why it is not a religion? And what is Hindutva? What is its relation to Hindu Dharma? And when I studied Savarkar's Essentials of Hindutva, I got the answers. In a way, this book is a big expansion of what Savarkar has given in a very crisp way in his Essentials of Hindutva. He says that Hindutva is the larger universal set of which what we generally understand as Hinduism is a subset. That is a great astonishment for me. Usually people think that Hinduism is something and Hindutva is a kind of a political ideology that preserves, that fights for Hinduism. Savarkar reverses the whole thing. He says that Hindutva is a national process. So there I got the first idea that this is a process. Hindutva is a process, it is not an ideology. And what is the process? What is at the base of this process? And for that I got the answer from Ram Swarup. And Ram Swarup gives in a very beautiful way, in a book that was posthumously published called Yoga Meditations, he points out that this entire civilizational process in India is also a process of consciousness. And the way this process has been developing in India, it has been preserving a core aspect, core element, and that is Theodiversity. In fact, the term Theodiversity was given by Professor Logesh Chandra, a professor of Buddhist studies. But Theodiversity is at the basis. And what is this Theodiversity? The one manifesting as many, and in the many discovering the oneness, without compromising the diversity. That is Theodiversity. So you have a respect for the varied manifestations of the divine. And that is the basis of India's civilization. That is where we can point out, if India as a civilization, where it starts, then we can say that it is at the dawn of Theodiversity. And where actually this Theodiversity happened, we can almost pinpoint it, and that is what I have attempted at the first chapter. When the Zoroastrians decided to move away from the Vedic Dharma, they said that we have got the true religion and this cannot be the true religion. And so they moved away. Venard tells very clearly that they were part of Sapta Hindu, and then it was the land that was given to them by Aghura Mazda, and then it becomes hostile, and so they moved away. What is this hostility that happened? Definitely it was not climate alone or climate. We can understand that from the inscriptions of Xerxes and Darius, we can understand one thing, that is that they were hostile to the worship of the Devas, the multiplicity of the Godhead. They created not monotheism. This is something very important because they did not create monotheism. They created a monopolistic religion where you have a basic dualism between the God of light and truth, Ahura Mazda, and this God of falsehood, who was battling this God of good, Ahriman. So this fight gets morphed into the society, gets mapped into the society, and once it gets mapped into the society, all your civilizational enemies, all your cultural enemies, all your dogmatic enemies, and even your personal enemies, they can be shown as enemies and the pawns of the God of darkness. When Jews come here in exile, actually originally the Jewish religion is a monotheistic religion, it was not a monopolistic religion. One aspect of monopolistic religion is that it does not say that there is one God, it says that the only one God of mine alone is the true God. So this is the only truth. And this sets itself against theodiversity. So when the Jews came in exile, they learned these aspects of Zoroastrian religion. It starts influencing them. Elaine Pagels has written a book called The Social History of Saturn. You can find it very fascinating because the Saturn as a theological concept, it flowered completely in Christianity. Christianity was the result of a strong Persian influence. And here the Saturn becomes an important construct, the theological construct to fight against their theological enemies, who happened to be at that time, when the Saturn concept was growing, the enemies were the Jews. So the Saturn, if you look at him very carefully, it is a very intimate enemy for Christianity, for Christian theology. And then it gets evolved again and again, and then it comes back, and it becomes part of a strong dominant worldview. We today call it Abrahamic worldview. I have a problem there because, as I said, the Jewish religion is not monopolistic. It is the monopolistic expansionism that is a problem for theodiversity. So this monopolistic expansionism, it comes and it attacks. And when the monopolistic expansionism started first, as we in the first chapter of the book, it is shown very clearly. If you look at the Persian inscription, you find this: I destroyed the temples of the Devas, and then I installed the one true God there, who was Ahura Mazda. Now you take that inscription, it is almost 2500 years old. You take that inscription, you remove that with a certain medieval ruler, you get a perfect medieval inscription of temple demolition. So in that inscription, you find the word Hindu there. That is the first expression of the word Hindu. So the word Hindu, when it appears in the history first time, it denotes not just a geographical region, it also denotes a particular spiritual dispensation, a particular spiritual vision, a darshana. And that darshana has at its core theodiversity. Then you look at where the word Hindu comes again. I am skipping some parts, some important parts. You find Huan Song uses the word Hindu to mean the entire India. And here also he uses it not in terms of geography, he uses it in terms of a spiritual dimension. He says that this land is like the moon for the spiritual darkness of the world because of the rishis and the jnanis and the avatars and the bodhisattvas who come here. And because of that, this land is like the moon, and in Chinese he says the moon is Hindu, and hence this land is called Hindu. So this word Hindu appears in history always whenever there is a need to protect theodiversity. When Vijayanagara Empire uses the word in historical times, they call themselves Hindu Raya, when they were battling the monopolistic expansionism. And then Veer Shivaji uses the word Hindutva Swarajya, when he was battling the monopolistic expansionism. So this word Hindu again and again appears in the history whenever there is a need to reassert, protect and nurture theodiversity. So that answers your first question, what is the non-negotiable? It is theodiversity. That is the non-negotiable thing. And Savarkar ends the book in a very beautiful way. Most of the people who want to quote Savarkar, they never quote these lines. He says that height of Hinduness ceases to be a Hindu. He embraces the entire world, the entire universe as his home. So, that aspect, that the realization that the Nama Rupa has to go at one point, and you have to embrace the universal. From the form you move to formlessness, not anti-form, formlessness. That aspect, the embracing of the entire universe, that is the goal of the Hinduness of this civilization. And Savarkar asserted that at two levels. At one level, Savarkar asserted it in terms of the so-called racial categories of humans. Remember, Savarkar wrote the essentials of Hindutva in 1923, 20 to 23, he wrote. At that time, even the most liberal humanitarians of the West, the greatest humanist philosophers of the West, they believed in the racial categories of human beings. That was at best beneficial racialism, benign racialism. So they thought that certain races were kind of endowed with greater capacities, higher civilization, higher intellectual abilities, and they should make the other races come up. So they believed races as categories. Savarkar interestingly says that this is all nonsense. He says that these race categories that we are creating are artificial divisions. In fact, there has always been mingling of the races, and from pole to pole, if there is one thing that is reality, it is this, that human beings are one. That every person he can climb, only thing that he can climb is that the blood of all the races are flowing in his veins in 1920. Today it is very easy to make this statement because we have the insight of genetics. Richard Lewontin has done a wonderful work on this, despite the fact that he was a leftist. But today, see, we can tell this very easily. 1920 to say this, how he could arrive at it. So my conviction is that Savarkar arrived at this because of his own Hinduness. So there he talks about at the biological level, at the very physical level, there is oneness. And then when he ends, he says that we are all one. Then when he designed the flag for Hindu Mahasabha, he made the Kundalini movement part of that flag. That was a grand civilizational statement. Because he said that this Kundalini, he explained it. He explained the whole thing, the symbolism of that flag. He said that this Kundalini is the highest possibility of a human being, the highest possible bliss that a human being can experience, irrespective of the fact whether he is a male or whether he was a female or a black or white or a Muslim or a Hindu or a believer or a non-believer. He says that even an atheist, he has the right, he has the potentiality to experience this highest bliss. And the discovery of this bliss, Kundalini, is one of the crowning civilizational achievements of India. And it defines us. What defines us? The discovery that each soul is potentially divine and each soul can attain that potential divinity through various means. That is the basis of India's civilization. Everything else is commentary. So, this aspect of Savarkar, this discovery of Savarkar rather, is important for Hindutva. It defines Hindutva. And whatever we call our sampradayas, the different sampradayas, they are all part of this overarching unity. So this is the first chapter of the book, what the first chapter deals with. Then comes the question of Bharat Mata. So in the case of Bharat Mata, I have taken the quotation that was famous made by Irfan Habib, that Bharat Mata was a colonial import. That you looked at Britannia, Britannia looked like the goddess with the trident and the lion, everything, and so the Indian nationalists of that time, they just copied Britannia and they made Bharat Mata. So I have looked into that particular question in the second chapter, whether it is true. Here, fortunately, I have been aided by my anchoring in the culture of Tamil Nadu. The culture of Tamil Nadu cannot be studied in isolation because it is part of the pan-Indian culture. It has given a lot of things to Indian culture. We have to understand this very clearly. If you remove Tamil culture, the so-called Tamil culture from Indian culture, there will be a big void. In the same way, if you remove the so-called Tamil culture from the Indian culture, then it will die a very humiliating self-death. What will die? The Tamil culture will die. Okay? So it is integrated. I will give you one specific example of how it works. So if today in India, you go to any part of India, any language speaking person, and you ask him to give an example of an animal that is doing its work, that symbolizes an ordinary person contributing himself selflessly for a great cause. Give an animal. A person from Haryana, a person from Maharashtra, a person from Punjab, they all would say the squirrel that was helping the Ram Setu. Right? It is a pan-Indian image. The squirrel helping the Ram Setu. In fact, there is a feminist organization in Maharashtra called Sparrows, and that organization does an archiving project of all the important women activists who participated in different, say, labor movements, freedom struggle, reformation movement, etc., etc. And one leftist social reformer, a woman, and she was giving her, telling her about what her life, and then she said, I was like a squirrel building the Ram Setu. Spontaneous. So this is the symbol. Squirrel is the symbol, pan-Indian symbol of selfless service of an individual to a great cause. You don't have that in Valmiki Ramayana. The very first literary evidence of this squirrel helping Rama build the Setu comes in a Tamil Alvar hymn. Tondaradipudi Alvar, he had told that, see, even the squirrel was coming and it was helping, even as the mighty apes were building the Setu, the squirrel was coming and helping selflessly. I am not even like the squirrel, how I can attain salvation? That is his song. Okay. Now, you think about it, a particular beautiful imagery comes in from South India, it becomes part of Pan-India. Bhakti movement. It is said that the Bhakti movement was born in this Dravida part of the land and then it moved to the entire India. And without Bhakti movement, we wouldn't have resistant movements like Khalsa, we wouldn't have resistant movement like the Maratha movement against the invaders. And the entire North India would have become part of Pakistan. That didn't happen because of the Bhakti movement, and Bhakti movement originated in South India. So, if you look at the entire India, you cannot say this belongs to North India, this belongs to South India, it belongs to all the Indians. And that, taking that aspect, you look into the origin of Bharat Mata, you find that the goddess who is wielding the weapons, she appears again and again at all the times of crisis. Whenever India was undergoing a crisis, this vision of the goddesses with the weapon arises. So when Madurai was attacked by the Delhi Sultans, and they created something called Madurai Sultanate, they forbade the temple worship throughout Tamil Nadu, and they closed the famous Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple for a good 40 years. No puja, nothing. It was completely closed. And the cows were getting killed in the sanctum sanctorum of the temples, and the rivers were overflowing with the blood of the killed cows. So they had created a havoc. At that time, from Vijayanagara, Kampanna Nayaka was sent to fight for protecting Dharma, but he came up to Kanchi, and in Kanchi he secured a brilliant victory. He thought, okay, this is enough and I would settle for a very good rest, and he was complacent. And when he was having a good time, a sage appears along with the woman, and the woman brings a sword and tells that this was the sword of the Pandyas and the Cholas, given to them by Shiva himself, and I am giving it to you, now you take it and you liberate Mathura. So this is actually in a small epic called Mathura Vichayam, written by Ganga Devi, a woman. And this goddess giving the sword. Again, if you look at Veer Shivaji, you will find that calendar art is very famous. Bhavani giving the sword, his sword itself was called Bhavani. You take Guru Gobind Singh's sword was called Bhagavati. So you have the famous Nagaland queen who was fighting against the British. She has a vision in which she goes to a cave and a goddess, think about it, in Nagaland, So we would say that totally unrelated to the Indian mainland, etc., etc. She has a vision. She has recorded it. A goddess was sitting on a tiger and she gives her a mystical rifle with which she starts fighting the British. So this goddess who takes up arms to fight for Dharma is there enshrined right from the Vedic times as Vak. If you study the Vak Sutta, you will find that I am taking the bows and the arrows to fight for Dharma, for fight for the people. Then you look at the sculpture, the famous sculpture in Mahabalipuram, where the goddess sits on the lion with the bow and the arrow. You will understand that from Vak Sutta to Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, there is a continuity. And this continuity resurfaces itself in the form of Bande Madaram during the British time. It was not a colonial import. So that is what the second chapter is about. Then in the third chapter, we're talking about cow protection. How cow protection has to be understood in its entirety. So we have to understand cow protection as kind of a eco-social indicator. Just like how in a forest ecosystem, the number of tigers indicate the health of the forest. In the same way, the entire human ecosystem, with the animals part of it, the protection of the cow, that is an indicator of the wellness of, the ethical wellness of that particular human society. We have to understand this very clearly. And once we understand this, we will be able to place a lot of things in places. Then the book actually deals with the very delicate aspects there. Gandhi's relation and Savarkar's relation to cow protection. Many people tell that actually Savarkar proposed killing of the cow, etc. It is not so. That particular aspect has been clarified there. Gandhi went a step further. He said that cow protection should be achieved by talking to those who slaughter the cow and converting them to cow veneration. Essentially what he meant was use the cow protection to outreach, to take Sanatana Dharma to people who have not yet accepted it. It was a Gar Vapasi scheme in a large scale, in a very profound manner. Taking cow protection, convincing the people who were eating beef for cow protection instead of bringing a legislation. That is a very organic way of cow protection that Mahatma Gandhi attempted. And that is a mission that we still have to achieve actually. And it also looks into the Lynchstone narrative. So one of my colleagues in Swarajya, Swati Goyal Sharma, she had actually gone through the entire data and she had found that it was not only the so-called cow sevaks who were doing the killing. Actually, that is very less. The actual reason is cattle smugglers are actually killing the cattle owners. That data has been hidden completely. Only one aspect of the data has been shown, that too in a distorted way. So that particular narrative has been countered there. Then we come to the idea of social egalitarianism, whether Hindutva is an upper caste racist ideology, or whether it has actually worked in the field for the emancipation. We can tell theoretically a lot of things, but can you actually historically show that Hindutva has worked for the benefit of the rising of the so-called scheduled community people, the marginalized sections of the people, the women empowerment, etc., etc. That is the question that it takes. So I will give you a very small answer to that. Okay, here you have a large number of girls sitting here. What had made the girls come and study here? If you take all the nations that became independent along with India in the same socio-economic conditions, you will find that India has a better number of girls studying than most of the other countries. So in economics they say ceteris paribus. If all conditions are equal. Okay, if all conditions are equal, if I am having, of course I have two daughters, and if I want my daughters to grow up in the larger Indian landmass, would that be Kabul, Afghanistan, would that be Pakistan, would that be Bangladesh, would that be Sri Lanka, would that be India? I would give the answer India. Would that be in any of the many African countries? I would give the answer India, because here the woman has more freedom and more capacity to empower, emancipate herself. So, why? Why this happened? Who was responsible for this? You know that at one particular point of time, there was a large amount of child marriages. Child marriage was an universal phenomenon. We have to understand that. Child marriage was also there in 18th century England. Everywhere they were fighting the child marriage at that time. There were certain reasons, socio-historical reasons for this have happened. We will not get into that. But in India, a child marriage was stopped because of an act called Sharda Act. We all know about that. But do we know the person who brought that act? Harbilas Sharda. Harbilas Sharda was the person who brought this act. He brought this act because he studied the Vedic scriptures and he found that this child marriage is not according to the Vedas, and he started doing a great, and also for humanitarian purposes, he started a movement for increasing the marriage age of girls, and it was a big fight because at that time the conservatives, the Islamists, and the upper class people, everybody, they joined together and they said that this is against our religion, etc., etc. The British were only happy. Because if you remain with the social problems, then it is very easy to govern you. If your women are getting empowered, it is a problem for the colonial government. And they can always blame the Indians for it. In fact, that was what was done in that Mother India book written by Catherine Mayo. And so, when this happened, Harbilas Sharda did it, and Harbilas Sharda was a Hindutvaite. He wrote the book called Supremacy of Hindu Civilization. He thought about a strong Hindu-Buddhist alliance across the Asian countries, so led by India, that would counter the colonial forces. He was one of the foremost ideologues of Hindutva. But for this Sharda Act, today this much amount of women wouldn't be sitting here. This is 2023. In 1923, Bombay Legislative Assembly passed a resolution. 1923. That legislation, that resolution was that act was that the scheduled community persons should be allowed access to all the public areas, and they should not be restricted because of jati. So they should be given access to the public roads, to the parks, to the public ponds, etc., etc. And that resolution was passed. And based on that, Mahat Satyagraha started. But for Mahat Satyagraha, today's India's social emancipation would be pushed back by a few decades. This is the centenary year of that famous resolution. That resolution is called Bole Resolution. It was brought by C.K. Bole. And C.K. Bole was the president of Provincial Hindu Mahasabha. And he asked Dr. Ambedkar to make saffron flag the national flag of India when India became independent. All these are recorded history. So, here you have actually a strong history where the Hindutva persons have done wonderful, spectacular historical contribution to social emancipation of India, but the whole thing was been rubbed aside, and Hindutva have been shown as a kind of conservative, upper caste, what is that they say, patriarchal, Brahminical, etc., etc. thing. So the history has been distorted and a new narrative has been created and it has been imposed upon us. Then I come to the study of the non-Sangh Hindutva ideologues like Swami Shraddhanand and others. Lala Lajpat Rai, how they worked. I'll give you a very sad example of Swami Shraddhanand work that I have documented in this. Even today it is a very problematic thing. You have the problem of unwed mothers. At that time it was rampant. Can you think of creating a hostel for such destitute women, unwed mothers and others? Even today, creating a hostel like that would be beset with a lot of problems. Hindu Mahasabha resolved to create a hostel like that. In the name of Swami Shraddhanand, the person who worked for that was Lala Lajpat Rai. A hostel was built for women like that, for Hindu women, and the children were taken care of, and they were given vocational training so they can start a life anew with their own independence, etc., etc. And this worked very fine, despite a lot of problems. The locals wouldn't allow a hostel like that to function, etc., etc. And till independence, it was functioning. It was a home where a lot of women had found new life and new meaning to their life, and children have been saved. After independence, that hostel was taken. The word Hindu was removed, And in the charter of that particular hostel, the word imparting Hindu Shastric education to the children, that was removed. And after that, the very purpose was defeated. The children used to get adapted by Christian missionaries in independent India. So here you have another one example of how institutions were created in absolutely different domains by Hindutva for the emancipation of women and children. This is an example of how Hindutva stalwarts worked. Then there was Lala Hardayal. He was one of the great free thinkers, and his work has been dealt in detail in the book. You just compare Lala Hardayal with Jawaharlal Nehru, then you would find how puny Jawaharlal Nehru looks in terms of intellectualism before Lala Hardayal. And he was a Hindutvaite. And then we come to the Sangh. And in the case of Sangh, I would point out certain important aspects. And so in the case of Sangh, just think about this. There was a movie in Tamil. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It was taken by Kamal Hassan, called Anbe Sivam. Anbe Sivam means God is love. Okay. It is about a trade union activist. So he falls in love, he goes in a bus, he meets with an accident and somewhere near the Kerala-Tamil Nadu border. And he gets saved by a Christian missionary. And he is given a new life. And then again he starts this trade union activism, and then he goes near Orissa, and again he meets with the train accident, and there again who comes? The same Christian missionaries. And this is contrasted with the Hindu religious people who are hypocrites, who are just upper caste, capitalist bloodsuckers of humanity. What is the reality actually? There had been an organization. When there was a Quailon rail accident, a tragedy of a big proportion, this organization was the first to reach there and serve. Then, when there was a mid-air collision of Saudi airplane above UP, the first organization to reach there and give assistance was this organization. 1984, Bhopal gas tragedy. Okay, in Bhopal gas tragedy, the first organization to go there along with the Indian Army and serve the people was the RSS. All these organizations was RSS. They did. Everywhere, wherever there is a calamity, man-made or nature-made, RSS had been the first to go and reach there. Right? Now, when in 1984, when this was happening, I used to go to RSS Shagas. There the Mukhya Seshak would be telling us that our people are going and they are doing this rescue, etc., etc. I have never seen it in newspapers. I have never seen it in any of the magazine reports or anything. Then, decades later, Dominic Lapin, okay, who wrote Freedom at Midnight, he wrote a book on Bhopal. In that, the first persons to reach Bhopal and do work was the missionaries of charity. Okay? Not RSS. And in fact, the Indian army is shown in a villainous way. The Indian army completely encircles Bhopal so that it doesn't allow Bhopal people to go out. It was true that Teresa of Calcutta went to Bhopal at once the tragedy happened. But she didn't go there for charity purpose. She went there to talk to the authorities to leave Anderson out of India. Because Union Carbide was one of the greatest supporters of missionaries of charity. She didn't go there to serve the people. And when people asked her, actually the journalist asked her, it is on record, journalist asked her, what do you think about the people who had died? And then she told, what about the people who are doing abortions? There also there is death. Here is also there is death. That was her answer, a recorded answer. Okay. And then I wanted to present this in contrast with what the Sangh had done. And I asked the Sangh people, give me some photos. Okay. I asked this RSS people, give me some photos of your people doing and volunteer work. RSS people didn't have, and I asked them, why you don't keep these photos? They are important. Then the answer they told was, this is what they told me, okay, we are serving our brothers. When you serve your brother, you don't take photos and keep them. Okay. So that was their attitude. And I searched in the net and I discovered there is a photographer. You remember that famous photo of a single child's face with a hand on it? That symbolizes the entire Bhopal tragedy. Okay? That particular photo, the person who took it, he had taken a lot of photos on that day. That photos, and he was a Christian actually, and that photos, some 3 photos showed the Swayamsevaks in their famous half pants, taking the bodies, cremating the bodies, and doing help to the poor people around there. All those were there. RSS people didn't keep a record. Some photographer kept a record, he put them all in the online exhibition, he didn't even realizing it, and there you got the photo of RSS people working. The question that we have to ask is this, that how they created a system that wherever in India, where they are strong or not, there may be in place, there may be some 5 shagas, in another place there may be 50 shagas. But whatever place in India, when there is a tragedy, there is human misery, how these people are the first people to go and reach there. If you ask the disaster management people, they would tell you that there is this golden period of the first 24 hours. When you reach, then you will be able to save large number of people. How they were able to reach it? They didn't attend AC room seminars. They didn't undergo diploma training in disaster management, right? But they are able to reach. So here they have created actually a model, a cost-effective model. They didn't need any seminars. They didn't need any workshops. All they needed was a plain ground in which the people used to come and play kabaddi. And through that, they have created a network that reaches the places where disasters happen in a small period. It is a world record. It is a world phenomenon, unique phenomenon. And what is the basis of this unique phenomenon? It is Hindutva. We have never studied these aspects. So that is about the RSS aspect. Then you come to a chapter on science and Hindutva, where I studied the different aspects of how Hindutva has contributed to the institution building of science in India. That is something that people don't much talk about. Whenever they talk about Hindutva, they think that these people talk about Vimanas in Vedic time and all those kind of things. That is not true. For example, the first nuclear institution in India, it was not Bark, it was the cyclotron was installed in Calcutta, and this was done by Magana Saha, who had left-wing leanings, but he was totally helped in it against even Jawaharlal Nehru by Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. And in Coimbatore, you have sugar breeding station that had made India completely a self-reliant nation in sugar production, and it was created because of the toiling of Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya. Then you have traditional knowledge digital library that has reduced biopiracy, and it has become a model for all developing nations to preserve their biodiversity, and it was conceived by Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi. The famous Chandrayaan was given a clearance and complete support by Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi. So you still have this big, long contribution of Hindutva, not from the olden times, even in modern times, Hindutva has contributed to science building, science institution building in India. So that is dealt in one chapter. The last chapter deals with the most important aspect of the book, that is Theodiversity, preserving Theodiversity. Today we have, India already has sampradayas like Jainism, Buddhism, Saivism, Vaishnavism, Sikhism, and they have been having a lot of dialogues among themselves. In that I have taken one particular aspect. In 1984, the famous Holocaust, Sikh Holocaust happened. Before that, it didn't happen in one day. There was a build-up for that. A build-up was done by the Congress and the Agalis, and they wanted to divide Hindus and Sikhs permanently. And the stereotypes of Sikhs being violent and paid by the Pakistan, etc., was being disseminated throughout India. At that time, remember, in South India, you don't have Sikh population. But the stereotypes are coming. At that time, the official magazine of the RSS was the only magazine, only media that was giving us the histories of the Sikh gurus. And I have produced the covers of that magazine, a Tamil magazine, in 1982. In Tamil Nadu, we should talk about the greatness of the Sikh Panth to the Tamil people. Because it was showing them that don't think that they are a separate people. They are part and parcel of your great culture. You have to respect them. That was given to us. So that aspect has been shown there. Then I have shown how these dialogues of theodiversity is happening with Christianity and Islam. And it is a very complicated aspect. It is not the usual Sufi dance and song. In the Sufis aspects, I have shown how the Ijadist Sufis are basically the forerunners of Islamist expansionism as against the Vedantic Sufis, and who were a small number. And there is an interesting fact that has been highlighted in the book. The largest number of Sufis were killed by Islamist kings, not by Hindu kings. Hindu kings never persecuted a Sufi saint. Most of the Sufi saints persecuted and killed were by the Islamist kings. That is a very interesting aspect. Then we have shown how the dialogue between Christianity and Hinduism had happened in the West and how it is happening in India. In India, it is happening through conversion, it is happening through inculturation, and it is happening in expansionist model. There it is happening in interactive model. When it happens in interactive model, it produces positive results. When it happens in this comparative model, it creates a lot of human misery. And that becomes a framework for all of us to understand how theodiversity actually works as a process, not as an ideology. So, these are the aspects that have been presented in this book. The non-negotiable in all this is the theodiversity and the realization of the highest human expression. In fact, the realization of the consciousness expanding to cover the entire planet. That is what this book is about, and that is the non-negotiable aspect. The other aspects, the forms, etc., they will change. They will change according to the particular environment, the particular changing climate, the particular changing politics, society, the way we are using the resources, etc., technology, everything. They will change, and they will also influence the technology. For example, the technologies have embedded values. Okay. So, when you design a particular technology, you will know that who is going to be the end user, whether he is going to be a village person or whether who is going to be an urban person, whether it is a he or she. All that will be determined by these embedded values. So, what kind of embedded values are there in Hindutva that can be part of the technology, and how that will transform the technology is also there. But these are all peripherals. These all will change. This core will never change. So, it is this core that is Hindutva. And this core, I think, is needed for all the societies today. This is a gift that India has to give to the planet, to all the civilizations. Remember, when we are giving this civilization, we are not converting anyone. When you are going and having a dialogue with, when a Hindu goes to, let us say, the Uluru Rock in Australia, stands before it, he can bow his head, feeling that that is the ultimate reality, the most divine thing in the world. He can feel, or she can feel that. He doesn't have to do any theological adjustment there. He doesn't have to do any posturing there. It naturally comes. Right? And that is the basis. That way, what we do is, to an Australian aborigine, we are telling that we are validating, we are not converting, we are validating your spirituality, your spiritual tradition. That is very important. Once you validate a spiritual tradition, then naturally you will stand for his or her land rights. The land rights of the Amazonian tribes, the land rights of the aborigines, the right to practice the religion of the Maoris, the right to practice the religion of the African spiritual disciplines. So, actually Hindutva is the base from which theodiversity can be re-gifted to the entire planet. That is the importance of Hindutva. That is the civilizational responsibility of every Hindu, whether he is left wing or right wing, or which party he belongs to, or which geography he belongs to. That is the civilizational responsibility of each and every Hindu. With that, let me finish the talk. Thank you so much.
So now, because of limitations of time, we can take only 3 questions.
Good morning, sir. First of all, we have often heard in media that Hindutva and Hinduism are two different ideas. So my question is that, is there any difference between these two ideas?
As I said earlier, no. Hindutva is the superset, and Hinduism, as we understand Hinduism, is the subset of Hindutva. Okay. That said, let me, actually I have given a small Buddhist parable in the beginning of the book. Okay. What is the relation between Siddhartha and the swan? Does the swan belong to Siddhartha? Okay, you remember that story about the injured swan. Okay, so Devadatta aims an arrow at the swan and it falls down, and Siddhartha cures it, and then Devadatta wants the swan so that he could cook it and eat it. And then they go to the king's court, and there Indra comes in the form of an old man and tells that life belongs to the person who has saved it. Okay, and then Buddha says that Siddhartha says that the swan doesn't belong to even me, and he lets it go in the sky, right? So that is the famous Buddhist story. Now I relate this to Hindutva and Hinduism. Hindutva is the Siddhartha, and Hindu Dharma is the swan. Okay, when the Hindu Dharma has been attacked by the arrows of Devadats of the world, who was there to nurse it? Okay, who was there to nurse it? It was Siddhartha. So that is the relation.
Hello, sir. I have a question. We hear a lot about the caste system. I wanted to know that, there is a lot of debate going between should the caste system should be worth based or birth based. So I wanted to know what are your opinions on the same.
Okay, here let me quote the one person whom we should actually quote, which is Dr. Ambedkar. Okay, so Dr. Ambedkar says very clearly that Jati is birth based, Varna is worth based. Okay, so it is Varna that we are dealing with. Jati is just a social system, and it will come, it will evolve, it will go away depending upon the needs of the society. And today the Jati has become almost meaningless. In fact, even it has become injurious. Okay, and I will give you an example. Earlier, when a person of a particular Jati is given a particular position, okay, in a society, in a particular community, the understanding was that if he does anything wrong, his community will come and punish him. It will be held responsible for his misdeeds. Okay. Today, Jati is the last refuge of every corrupt politician. A corrupt politician, when he is caught, he says that it is because of my Jati that these people are telling. I didn't do any cattle fodder thing. It is because I belong to a particular Jati, these people are hounding me. Right? So, you can see how the Jati has transformed. It has nothing to do with Hinduism. It is a social structure. It exists everywhere. Social stratification based on birth is part and parcel of all human cultures, whether it is Western, Arabian, Indian or Chinese, it has been there. Okay? But Varna, which is worth based, which is based on Guna and Karma, that is something very unique. And basing it on Swadharma and Swabhava, as Krishna did in Bhagavad Gita, is something revolutionary. Okay? And that defines Hindutva. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay.
So can you please suggest the way so student like us get familiar ourselves and we can get idea and get more understand about this Hindutva?
Okay, the first thing that you have to do is, you have to look around yourself, you have to look within your own family, and you have to look how this civilization has shaped you. Okay? What are the good qualities that this civilization has given you? How they have come. And you then look at the media portrayals of your civilization, the way the textbooks are portraying your civilization, you will find an inherent conflict. What has happened is, so far we have developed a kind of an attitude, a dissociation kind of, a social dissociation syndrome, where we would be good civilizational Hindus within our house, within our family. Once we go out, we will do all the progressive posturing. Okay? That has been the greatest problem. It has created a social cognitive dissonance for the nation. Unfortunately, this particular generation that is sitting before me, they don't have that problem, because now the new narrative is coming up. For example, Sanyal had written these beautiful books on the churning of the Indian Ocean, the seven seas, and he is creating a narrative. Okay, then you have persons like Sai Debak, you have persons like Raju Malhotra. Everyone is contributing to this narrative building. And you have to take all these narrative buildings, you have to go through it, and then you have to correlate them with your own civilizational understanding from your personal experience, and translate them into immediate social activities around you. You will have a lot of learning to get from all these things. Okay.
Thank you so much, Aravindan sir. Your talk was tremendously powerful. It was eye-opening. Thank you for taking us through the journey of Hinduism. I remember Dr. Ram using this term very frequently, Hanuman syndrome. Hanumanji had a lot of powers, but he was not aware of his powers. In the same manner, we are Hindus, but we are not aware how powerful we are. And I guess Hanuman needed Jamvan to be aware of his powers. And over here, we have Aravindan Neelakandan, who is no less than Jamvan. He is doing the same thing. He is making us aware of our powers. So it's a blessing to have him. And yes, his book, please do read his book because whatever he has said, lot of it has been explained descriptively. So please do read the book. Thank you so much. With this, we complete the very first event.